Hello, people. I am not in your physical presence today, but instead I'm in a virtual presence with this video, which today I will talk about family values and views of certain groups in the 1950s, dressed up as a greaser. So to start off, family time in the 50s were very important due to the threat of a nuclear war occurring at any second against the Soviet Union. Also, in the household, 65% of children were raised by the mother, or in a single-parent household. Also, the father or husband would go to work. The mother and wife would stay home, cook, clean, and take care of the children. And the children typically went off to school or just hung out with friends outside. Also, divorce was highly uncommon in the 50s, with only 2.6 out of 1,000 households actually getting a divorce. Watching TV together became a huge staple for the American family due to the huge increase in family time and television sales in residential areas. They also listened to radio together and read newspapers. Now, the views of women in the 1950s were very difficult. They were told to stay at home and to raise the kids. And if they did get a job like millions did, they became nurses, secretaries, teachers, and librarians. But millions of them stayed in the workforce once the men returned home from World War II. And millions of them also went back to being stay-at-home mom. But the average woman to get married was 20 years old, and the average age for them to have their first child was 19.6 years old, which made premarital sex highly common. In 1950s relationships, it was very interesting. For example, in a book, 7 Ways to Keep Your Man, some of the examples include, don't talk to him, because communication in a relationship certainly is not important at all. But also, don't bother him with your drama and gossip and troubles. It'll only frustrate him. Also, let him have a little fun now and then. Let him stray away from the marriage and have an affair, which was highly common in the 50s due to this fact. And also, your husband is the boss of you. He controls when you talk to him, who you get to talk to, when you get to do something, etc. And children of the 1950s were pretty popular, considering after World War II there was an explosion of babies. The baby boom occurred mainly in the 50s, and these children started working as young as 14 or even younger in some cases, and very few even continued with their high school or college education. With this huge influx in kids, public facilities were often increased as well as schools. African Americans in the United States had it very difficult. With this, they were thought as not equal, but less than. They couldn't be slaves, so they had to be housemaids, houseworkers, or something very low paying. They shouldn't be together. Races should not be together in this era, but that was highly common because some schools were put together and the whites protested, resulting in certain schools being separated. And this became very common with separation of public facilities such as seating on buses and pools. It was very difficult for African American families to actually buy a house in certain neighborhoods due to the high price and largely white population. Grown African American men were often thought of and treated less than like a child, often talked down to, no matter what their military or business ranking was. African American women were never portrayed in pop culture through TV shows, movies, and very few successful singers. Also in this era, it is the most common revolution, the Civil Rights Act. These Jim Crow laws separated the whites and the blacks for ages, but fighting racial discrimination in the 50s started in 1951, when racial segregation in Washington, D.C. restaurants was declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, and also in 1952, for the first time in more than 70 years, the Tuskegee Institute finds that there were no lynchings reported in the United States. also. It is one of the most famous acts of the 1950s. December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat to a white man. She was deemed the Lady of Civil Rights and the mother of the freedom movement. So, in the 1950s, a lot happened between families, African Americans, women, and children. It is no doubt that there will be a huge influence for ages to come.